Welcome to another learning live stream where I have a guest, and it's the second time I've tried this, and we had more technical problems, different from the last ones. So it's not live, and thankfully so, because I think the problems this time were worse than last time. So they're completely different. But I do know what I'm doing, I promise. But today I wanted to look at creating a plugin for Obsidian, and because I just happened to have his attention, I decided to literally go to the source of the person who wrote the documentation on this, and that's Marcus Olsson. Now, Marcus, you don't work for Obsidian, do you? I don't think.
No, I kind of do. I am a consultant, and currently Obsidian is my client. So I'm working as a kind of a freelance developer educator.
Okay.
So I have a one-person consultancy where I help basically teams that build developer tools to educate their users.
Yep. I have done very similar things in the past. I know exactly what you mean. I'm not sure if everybody does, but yeah. And I will admit, Obsidian is one of these tools that I've tried many times to get into, and I never could. And then recently I have. And it's really starting to grow on me quite quickly. There's a few things I would love to change, but that's a wider discussion. Mm-hmm. The whole plugin world, and I have created plugins for VS Code, Raycast, not that those are particularly related tools, but I like making helpful plugins for things. And one of the tools that I have created for VS Code, and I think you've had some interaction with, is a tool called Veil, which is a language linter. I'm not sure if in this video we'll get as far as trying to get that to work, but I wanted to go through the basic plugin creation process.
Kind of making me feel bad here because my first plugin for Obsidian was actually a Veil plugin. Yeah. And that was before they shipped the stable version 1.0. So in that kind of version, if you were a plugin developer before that, a lot of things, changed. Yeah. And you would have to update your plugin, and I never found the time to do it. So sorry about that, everyone who's watching this and is using or was using the Veil plugin.
Oh, it's fine. It's fine. It may have some complexity, which we may or may not get to in this video. Mm-hmm. But I just wanted to go through the basic steps and discuss some of the pitfalls along the way, because I can already foresee a few. And just see how far I got whilst you sit there and feel annoyed or embarrassed. We'll see.
Not at all. I might pitch in if I come to think of anything interesting.
So firstly, I should probably not dig into, but very briefly explain what Obsidian is. I've just opened a default window here. It shows some of the interesting things, but it's also just my writing. So it's all going to be stuff that's public anyway. So Obsidian is... what is it? It's kind of sort of...
It can be a lot to a lot of people.
Exactly. This is the problem. It's kind of personal knowledge management, company knowledge management. There's a lot of tools in this space. It's a text editor. It's a task manager. It's a idea organizer.
Yeah.
It's many different things.
Second brain is another term that comes up every now and then.
That's the complexity to it. This is one of the nice things about it. This is actually just a folder I had for a long time that I was using predominantly with a program called Ulysses, which is a more just straight down the line macOS Markdown editor. And I was able just to open it, and Obsidian will open it as a vault. I'm not really doing anything special with it so far because I've only just converted to it. When I was recently writing this post, I could just mark links as a future thing I would like to work on. And in this kind of wiki style, which if anyone has also used Scrivener, which is a tool I use for a lot of fiction writing, has a similar concept, but Scrivener is much more of a closed box. So again, another future blog post. And these are all actually just links to other pages that I'll fill in at some point. And this is going to be a bit odd, maybe. Oh, a little odd. Yeah, there we go.
Right, but this is interesting. When I started using Obsidian for my like both personal and for work, I initially just use it as another Markdown editor.
Yeah.
I've been loving Markdown for a long time, and just being able to format my notes as Markdown is so useful to me.
And it works pretty well.
But it wasn't until when I discovered like links and the graph that you now opened that it kind of a light turned on for me.
Almost too much in some respects, and it could be many more different things thanks to the plugin architecture. So this, as you can see, looks very different from the other one. And this is actually one thing that's interesting. I've seen some comments, which I sort of agree with on both sides and disagree with on both sides, that each vault has different settings. To some people, that's an annoyance because you have things you always want to change. But in other ways, it's actually a positive because you get to have different setups for different use cases. So I've just opened a completely sort of default vault here. Some of the core plugins, you can see here, audio recorder, backlinks, which is like links between things, bookmarks, canvas, which is something new, which is a bit like freeform, MindNode, all these sorts of tools, and a whole bunch of other things. And then you have this community plugin section, which is where we're interested in. And as you can see, I haven't really played with them much yet. And this is one area where I'm always a bit concerned with community plugins in any ecosystem, because how do you guarantee a quality? How do you guarantee a performance? How do you guarantee a whole bunch of different things, especially in the JavaScript world, which I'm assuming from observations that we'll be writing in here. And VS Code has the same issue, of course. But yeah, so that's sort of where I got to. And I was just interested because I have a few ideas now. The Veil one is one idea, and some others. But the nice thing with Obsidian is generally I think, a plugin for X would be good. And I've done a few searches, and I find at the very least I'm not the first person to have thought about it. so
yeah, we're reaching about 1,000 plugins now. It's a lot.
Some are huge, like the data view, is it? Or data view, something like that is one that's massive, which I need to actually play around with.
Yeah, that's one of the bigger ones.
In a bit like Airtable and Notion and things like that.
I will just do a small pitch since you mentioned Airtable.
Yep.
If you are interested in Airtable, I'm actually maintaining a plugin called Projects that is kind of like Airtable, but in Obsidian.
Yep.
That is using, metadata from your notes and kind of displaying that in different ways.
Kind of interesting. There was a post I was reading yesterday about someone's creative writing setup, which I haven't really taken out of Scrivener yet for various other reasons. But especially for idea generation, it'd be very interesting. And I had quite a popular post that looked at note-taking applications and creative writing applications. And I'm starting to find some of them I could combine. There's a few things about Obsidian that don't quite work for me, but that's a wider discussion. Let's just get started with this.
That's the next stream.
So we need Git. That's fine. I need Node. That's fine. I need VS Code. That's fine. I created an empty vault. Download a sample extension. Let's just do that. And everything is basically here. So this is something I have seen. I am one of these Mac users that has invisible files turned on. There is this hidden folder in each case that has a bunch of the metadata in, the things enabled, disabled, that kind of thing. So that's obviously a way you could sync config. I've messed around with this at a Mac OS level, actually, so there's no reason you couldn't kind of do something similar maybe, but that's me being pure conjecture. So we need to change into that directory. That's what I'm going to do. Going to pop that.
Yeah, and not just settings and configuration, but your plugins that you install are also ending up in there.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, they actually develop from their the .obsidian folder. The tricky thing then is I think if you actually uninstall a plugin, don't quote me on this, but I think if you uninstall a plugin that you're developing, it might actually delete that folder.
Yeah.
So make sure that you have a Git repository somewhere where you have your code, so you're not ending up losing your work.
Now, there's an interesting thing I just discovered already. If it's an empty vault, you don't have the plugins folder.
Right. That's actually good feedback. I might update the docs.
So that cloned that. And this is a template repository. These are not as widely used as they could be, but
they're actually very useful.
Yeah, they are very useful. Yeah. Okay. We'll move into the directory. Makes sense. Let's just have a little look at it. TypeScript. Very good. I will open it up in VS Code for now.
Yeah, so you've cloned a sample plugin from the Obsidian team that the Obsidian team actually maintains. And if you've built anything for the front end in the past, you'll know that there's a lot of configuration that you need to be able to build it in the first place. And a lot of it is just not interesting to you as a plugin developer. So that's kind of why the sample plugin is so useful.
Yep.
Because you can right away just jump into the actual code.
And this is similar to VS Code and also to Raycast, which just mentioning those because they're two other ecosystems I develop plugins for, that it's actually TypeScript or JavaScript and you run it whilst you're building, which is fine. Okay, so enable the plugin. This is something I don't think I've never enabled community plugins, as I mentioned. So let's do that. We'd have to turn on community plugins under installed.
I feel obligated to add here that there is a risk of enabling community plugins.
Yes.
The Obsidian team reviews plugins. Every plugin that gets published, they don't review every update or every release to a plugin, but they do review the initial version. And a plugin does have access to a lot of things.
Yeah.
So only enable plugins that you feel like you can trust.
Okay, I've missed something here. Go to community plugins. Installed, turn on community plugins.
So it's not showing up under community plugins. That means that it might be in the wrong folder, perhaps. Maybe let's go back and see where did we clone it to?
Let's see.
So it is under I think I know. Well, you did build it.
I dev'd it. I didn't build it.
It will generate the JavaScript necessary either way.
Is the right folder because that didn't exist. Just double check it is.
So, just in case, there is a command you can run inside Obsidian.
Okay.
That if you open the command palette, command P, I believe, and then you run something called reload application.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, without saving. Try that.
Okay.
And try now to see if it shows up.
That's always a surefire.
There you go.
All right. Okay. Fine. That's a surefire. That was something VS Code did for ages, and they have a much bigger team, I'm sure.
Yeah. So Obsidian loads plugins when you start it up. So if you add a new plugin, you need to reload the application.
Yep. Makes sense. Okay. I'm going to change my manifest.
You're in the manifest now.
Yep.
So this is a file that is custom to Obsidian. So this is kind of a file that provides metadata for Obsidian about your plugin. For example, the name of it, the ID, the version. As you can see, there is one field called min app version, which is the minimum version of Obsidian that you need, that the user need to run your plugin.
This is all very similar to VS Code as well, actually. And I'm sure that I have noticed some discrepancies between the different versions of Obsidian. So I'm guessing this is desktop only versus.
Obsidian is available both on desktop and on mobile. but they're not using the same technology underneath. So if you're, for example, running on desktop, you have access to some of the Node.js, some of the Electron APIs that you don't have available on mobile. So if you really want to use those APIs, you're free to do so, but knowing that it will crash on mobile. So here's a way you can kind of disable it on mobile to make sure that users don't try to install it.
Don't even really make sense probably on mobile as well. Maybe, I don't know. Or they'll be hard. It's weird because I noticed about that Canvas plugin. It says it doesn't work. It only works on desktop, but it comes on the iPad version, I think. I think it did anyway.
It does?
Well, it seemed
Truth be told, I haven't really started using it yet. I know it looks super powerful.
Yep. So we have TypeScript here, main TypeScript.
Yeah, so this is the entry point to your plugin, the main.ts.
Yeah.
And I should add that this is code written in TypeScript. And if you're not aware of it, it's a language written by Microsoft that converts into JavaScript. So once you build your plugin, you will see a main.js as opposed to TS, which is the JavaScript code that was generated.
Yeah. Just out of interest, so here, the tutorial says to add these, but they're already here. So should I just replace this or just leave it as it is?
You can leave it as it is. We'll
get obviously maybe some TypeScript warnings because TypeScript is fussy. In the onload method, I guess because this doesn't really matter on the order in some cases.
No.
Add command. And the ribbon, I'm assuming, is It's on
the left side. That one, yes. So if you want to add an icon to the ribbon, that is what you do. And so there are two interesting methods inside the plugin class that you're in right now. One is called onload, and one is called onUnload. Mm-hmm. So onload gets called when you load or enable the plugin. So all of this is kind of setup code inside onload, and it will pretty much only be run once. And this is where you set up, like, if you have setting tabs, if you have other resources that you want to enable for your plugin, for example. Here in the sample plugin, you can see that you're adding commands already. Okay. So if you want to add another ribbon icon, this is where you do it.
So this might refer to the problem we had.
No. So the problem that we're seeing before was that the plugin hadn't been registered in Obsidian yet.
Yeah, but this probably is useful, I guess.
It will only be useful after the Obsidian have registered your plugin. So the hot reload plugin is a very useful plugin that listens for code changes in your directory and then reloads the plugin.
So if I don't have it installed, I have to keep stopping and starting the server.
Yes, you need to do it manually, like we did before with the reload app.
Well, let's install that. Is that a community plugin, I guess, or?
Yes. So that's not an official plugin, but it's a very useful one. I am not sure it is. If you go to the GitHub project page for the hot reload, it's not actually published.
Intriguing.
Yeah.
So do I have to clone it then?
Yes, correct.
Okay, so that's also interesting that you can do things like that is interesting in itself. That, I don't know, it's a little peculiar, but it kind of adds some possibilities as well.
That you can download plugins to the folder?
Yeah, because you can have like a kind of setup template almost.
So I think
of something. I don't know.
I think you cloned it to the sample plugin right now.
Oh dear.
So I think
This is always the.
And then go down one level.
Bad enough doing these things, talking out loud to myself, but when there's also someone else talking,
live demos, right?
Oh, that's my plugin. That's interesting. That's still there, I guess.
Yep. There you go. Yeah.
Okay. I assume I will have to restart my one.
Yeah. So now you see a little notice up there that has been reloaded. And that's the hot reload plugin working its magic.
That's the sample one is still there, which is interesting. That's a slight, I don't think, because it's not even showing.
I think it's because the sample plugin right now, it registers multiple ribbon icons. So one is the one you added, and one is the...
Okay. But we can see the thing, hello world.
Yep.
There we go. Cool. All right, that was easy enough so far.
Yeah, so ribbon icons are great if you have something like one-off that you want to do, and you can obviously run it multiple times. Sometimes it's used to just display a view of your, maybe you have a list of things, of resource that you want to show, bring up in a new tab or something like that, open a file, and that's when ribbon actions are really useful.
All right. So I guess we should go to the next. That seems to be the next most reasonable place to go to.
Right. And we kind of covered this a little bit earlier, that you have two very interesting methods here.
These all seem pretty understandable, at least on a basic level. Mm-hmm. Of the plugin. Okay, yep, that makes sense. I'm sure there's much more to an anatomy of a plugin than that, but
let's start there.
And I'm assuming if we have a look at this, that's some auto-generated docs. That's cool.
Correct.
Development workflow. Yep. That's pretty much everything we looked at. Mobile development, I think we covered a little bit of already, but we can emulate it, which is interesting.
It's very useful because Obsidian will obviously look a little bit different. So if you do develop a plugin that is supported on mobile, you might want to emulate it. And maybe a little comment on what you just did there. You brought up a console. And the console is a way for you to kind of interact with your plugin in a way. You can see output, console logging, and stuff like that.
Yep. I am generally not a fan of Electron applications, as many people will know, but VS Code and Obsidian seem to be two of the slightly better behaved ones. Some of my issues with Obsidian relate to the fact it's Electron, but actually some of the operating system integration is better than others. It could always be better, but that's the nature of contributions. It's the nature of what's possible. It's the nature of it, shall we say. But it's not too bad. And actually the nice thing is because it often just mimics the file system, some of the things you can't do, you still can kind of do just in the file system, which is quite nice, actually. Okay. Platform-specific features. So is this like the operating system platform, or?
I think it's not a one-to-one. I don't have all the options in my head right now, but if you import it, you can probably see it from the auto completion. What's available? I think you might have one for like iPad, for example. So it's not. I guess that's its own iPad OS. Now thinking about it, but yeah, you have several different flags here.
Sorry, that is Copilot getting in the way. Not really helping. I don't know why we're not getting. Oh, here we go. Desktop mobile.
Yeah, you got a tablet mode there as well.
Desktop app. Interesting. iOS and tablet macOS with Linux Safari. This is interesting. So can you run Obsidian in a browser?
So I think I would refer to the Obsidian developers on this, but I believe if you're running Obsidian on an iOS device, it's actually running inside a Safari view.
Sure, yeah.
So there is actually a bug in Safari where you can't do a special type of regular expression, and I, for one, had to add like a little check that if it was running in Safari, then I couldn't use that regular expression, essentially.
Yeah.
So, Safari is mostly useful if you're running on iOS.
Yep, for sure. Okay. We talked about this. We talked about this loosely. This is somewhat limiting in some respects.
That's what I mentioned in the past, that you're not running Electron on mobile, so which is why you can't use those APIs.
And then we have
then the look behind that you saw there. That's what I was mentioning on why you might want to have a flag for Safari.
I'm forced kicking and screaming to understand regex, look behind and look ahead and all these sorts of things because of Veil, which we'll come to. That's a whole separate conversation that probably lost a lot of people. But Veil is basically does a lot of very convenient wrapping around regex expressions. So, all right. And then adding React, adding Svelte, whatever you want for some kind of front-end component.
Yeah, so this and the Svelte guide is more if you know already that you want to develop your plugin using a framework like React or Svelte, you can use these to set up your configuration essentially because there's a little extra stuff you need to configure in order to build the actual views.
Makes sense. I'll have a very quick look through some of this, but I think maybe we can jump to the older version of the Veil plugin and have a quick look through it. But just because obviously there is that big text box, what if you want to call it, text document in Obsidian, but the power is really all the other things it does around that. So it's worth knowing what's possible. So this is adding commands. What I'm actually interested really is, which I'm not seeing, maybe it's somewhere else, is I'm not sure if this is a naive question, but so to me, the real power of Obsidian is all that kind of linking.
Right.
Are there, I don't know if this is the naive question, but are there ways of...
Do you have a use case in mind that you would
Not
like to
particularly.
explore?
I'm just wondering, because that's kind of the special sauce of Obsidian. I'm just thinking like, it's weird because so far I look at a lot of this and I just think, oh, this is pretty expected, but I'm not kind of seeing what would let me create that mind map view, for example, or is it just no specific APIs for that? It's just, I guess it's just.
So I guess what you would be looking for is some information about what links are in a file, for example.
Because that's not a standard Markdown link either, that wiki style link.
It is not, no. I actually think
interested. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter for my ideas anyway, but just out of interest.
I wonder if you could, it's definitely possible. I think that you can access it. I won't promise this, but there is a way to access metadata about a note.
Yeah.
And the metadata cache. That's what it's called. So if you yes.
Okay.
So if you go to the app and then click the metadata cache type, so on the right, there you go.
Yes. Okay. So records. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. File
and
to.
And then you have a few methods here.
Yeah. Okay.
And so
cool.
And the all the on methods down there essentially lets you register a callback. So whenever a link gets updated or resolved or anything like that, then you can call your code. If you want to do something like this, you can access this metadata cache on the app property inside the plugin. So if you, where you are right now, if you just start a new line and type something like this, dot app and dot metadata cache, I believe.
Oh yeah, there we go.
Yes, there you go.
Yeah. I should turn off Copilot. Sometimes it gets in the way. Okay.
So in general, there's a bunch of useful, like instances, services on the app object that you can access like you just did.
And for the most part, though, looking through this, like adding menus, adding commands, is all pretty straightforward. Really, the complexity comes in your JavaScript, which which is not particularly unique to Obsidian. So, yeah.
Yeah, and for me personally, I think the trickier parts is when you want to combine all of this.
Yeah.
And you want to make sure that you have shared data across all the, like you might want to access data in a command, in a ribbon action, and in a settings view, and you want data to kind of go between all of these.
Like
that's
state.
Yeah. So this is state management for the editor, and I will also say that if you want to create a plugin that adds stuff to the editor, that's kind of more of an advanced use case. So there is some reading that you will probably need to do before you dive in. So I suggest that you start with some of the stuff that you saw in the user interface. But obviously, if the plugin you want to build requires you to do some magic in the editor, that's when you want to.
That seems like a good segue because, well, as far as I'm concerned with the VS Code implementation of Veil anyway, which I can probably show in the README, it adds decorations to the editor all over the place.
Yes.
All right, let's have a look at that and just out of interest see, I mean, can I install what you made, or is it not even available, or is it so behind I shouldn't even bother, or is it worth trying?
Which one?
The Veil extension you made.
I don't think it's worth it. Honestly, I don't know if it will even load.
It's worth it because I must admit, do you even have it here? Let's see.
It might be. It might.
Oh, there we go.
No, there it is. Okay.
We've had a few downloads.
And I would guess that those downloads came before Obsidian 1.0. It's 2 years ago.
This is one that there's no point starting from scratch, but let's just try it out of pure interest.
Okay. Well,
you never know. You might be pleasantly surprised.
One thing though, it requires the what's called the legacy editor. So in Obsidian 1.0, they introduced this live preview editor.
Yeah.
And in order for Veil to work, it needs to run on the legacy editor. And I know, actually, let's look at that first, just to see if it's even possible.
Is that something? Is that something that you think we could, well, say we, one, could fix in this plugin, or is that something
yes.
that... Yes, okay.
It's definitely possible. It's just that it's non-trivial to update it. So I think you need to go to editor, and then I think it's default editing mode, maybe? No, sorry. Oh, you know what? They might have actually removed the legacy now, thinking about it.
Oh, there we go.
No, there it is. Oh, okay.
Or restart. Yeah. All right, okay.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens. It's a start.
Yeah.
Did that restart? Oh, I guess it did. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's get rid of it.
Let's enable it. Got it right there.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, this is interesting. This is actually something that is worth mentioning in this particular case. It's not completely unique to Veil, but it's different. Is that Veil is actually another binary that needs to run.
Yes.
It's a compiled Go binary. This causes some problems for a lot of integrations, actually, why we've never been able to do anything like a sort of using it in Word and things like that, or even in the browser was problematic. I can imagine there's other tools like this, but it just happens to be a unique, well, not a unique problem, but a common problem we have when we try to make integrations here.
Yeah, so this will actually, if you click that will actually install the CLI to the plugins folder.
Is that the only?
No, you can use the Veil server, as you're probably familiar with, and that is using a REST API.
All right, so okay, we've hit a problem here. Veil server doesn't exist anymore.
Oh,
So can you also call binaries installed elsewhere, like through Homebrew or through Chocolatey or through Linux packages?
I believe you can, actually. Again, I haven't touched this in the last 2 years.
That's
so
JavaScript.
Let's see.
Thing.
So, actually, if you disable it, at the bottom, it says Manage Veil CLI. If you disable that, I think that you can.
There we go. Perfect. Well, that solved that problem. Absolute path. I guess this is compulsory. Does it have to be yes, it literally says absolute path. Okay.
Yeah, because it doesn't have to be inside the Obsidian vault.
Yeah. Now, this is no good. Homebrew alias is it, isn't it? So, now, the complexity with the I have a rather unique setting. So just for a little bit of context to anyone watching, because this is getting a little bit in the weeds about Veil, not Obsidian. It's a language linter. It has a series of configuration files and a series of rules that you configure, like to check for certain things. If you use the code linting, it is comparable. But because I build a lot of rules and I do a lot of testing, I have a rather weird setup to make it easier for me. So I, for example, have my config file is actually a symlink to allow me to like mess around more easily. So, which shouldn't be a problem, but it might be. We'll see.
I can't guarantee it resolves symlinks, but we'll see.
What happens? And then it is, I always, to be honest with you, completely forget. Oh no. It's the second time on this stream I've made the same mistake. This is completely unviewable, I know, but I know what I'm looking for. This one here. Yeah, we'll see if this works. We have had similar issues with the VS Code one, and we're able to fix it. So there's cases where, depending what is doing the loading, the extension or Obsidian, the plugin or Obsidian, it may be resolvable. Oh, look at that. Wow.
Yeah.
Smart, Marcus, smart. Why does that have a cog and that doesn't? What are you picking up from on here?
Well, if you click it,
I think you might have just put it there as a.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Now this is interesting because if I was to just again getting in the weeds, but if I was to edit that file, this is the config file. It's an ini sort of with a bunch of things you want enabled with some override. So I already have configuration here. And this is interesting because it's an interesting thing to think about moving forward with this, which is where you always get to with these kinds of integration options, is you've enabled this potential to turn things on and off, but of course the config file already determines that.
So this, if you enable and disable, this will actually update your config file.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah.
And this is probably because, as you saw in my config file, again, because of the testing, there's different ways to enable and disable things with Veil config. You can enable just everything in the rule set, or you can enable and disable bits. And I tend to do it on the bits level because I'm often testing things. And this is something people have asked for in the VS Code extension as well, but we generally have gone for just the do it all in the files approach because it's more consistent. But the fact that you're writing backwards and forwards is some things I could borrow potentially.
So if you try to enable, the Microsoft one, that will actually, I am going update
to try it, but I'm going to make a copy of.
Yeah, that's probably better. don't trust me. So look, if you look in the.
To be honest with you, we don't need to worry about it too much. It's
okay.
That's an implementation you've done that's quite nice, but I'd rather focus on some of the more the code side. I think for now, I'll just turn it off.
Because what should happen is that when you download it, it will actually give you additional options for enabling parts of it.
That's actually really nice because there's something people have often asked for in the VS Code extension is some kind of onboarding thing, because the onboarding steps by default are a bit, install a binary. You've already lost some people
Yeah.
make this config, etc., etc. It's not great for an audience that are primarily writers, albeit technical writers. And if they're using VS Code, they probably have a vague idea of what they're doing. But still, it would be nicer to offer something.
Yeah. So that's kind of why I ended up implementing the managed Veil idea, where you just click a button, you download it to your Obsidian Vault, and this will be very exciting for me. I haven't touched this in a very long time.
What I'm going to do now is I actually have some test files that I use a lot, so I'm going to pull in one of those. I was going to copy them into the... there is. So, oh no, yes, it needs to be in there. Now, this is something I always love with Obsidian in that, no, I always forget, to be honest with you. Well, there it is, yes.
Yep.
It's just, I'm not used, one of my default settings for my Obsidian is I make the font a lot bigger. So, so that's the, oh, that's interesting. Oh, there's nothing in it. Okay, that's odd. I'm sure there used to be. Let's.
Good place to start.
It's probably that one. That's probably why.
You can drag and drop it into Obsidian as well.
Oh, crazy.
So if you drag, I think if you drag it to the Obsidian plugins heading. Yeah.
All right. So that is a file. I'm not seeing anything, but that's not necessarily expected.
Yeah. So here's the thing. You won't see anything until you actually run the Veil.
So is
command.
That?
Yeah. If you search for check document. Let's see now.
Veil is also updated a lot, so it could be.
Yeah. Okay.
Could be a whole bunch of reasons.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay. I think it's probably...
No. I think I know what's happening here.
Okay.
I think this relates to what we were looking at with that config, in that your plugin is making an assumption, I think, that most people haven't done what I've done. So I think if I do it this way, I think this is what I assume. But I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think you can just do the check document again.
What am I doing wrong here?
You might have to reload it. If it crashed, maybe you need to reload it. Oh, there it is. Okay.
Yes, there we go.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
okay.
Your plugin is assuming that everyone has done this sort of more default setup, which, as I explained, I have a slightly weird setup. Oh, we've even got decorations. This is pretty good, Marcus. This is pretty good.
I think if you click it, it will. Yeah, nice. It will go to the one.
I mean, we have to enable a legacy feature, but still, it's a start.
Actually, this is kind of nice. I was just assuming it was completely broken.
And now I don't think this existed. It only existed in Veil Server when you made this plugin, probably. But now you can actually also implement the fixes as well, if it's enabled in a rule.
Yeah, I remember doing this. That it was kind of an experimental stage.
Yep. Now it's not always relevant, of course. For example, correcting passive voice, you can't automatically fix it without being able to read the relevant context of the text, which is half the reason most people use Veil, is they don't want some cloud service reading their text. So let's have a very, very quick look at the code, because I'm going to have to wrap up. But I'm interested to see what you did just very quickly.
Yeah, so this is a React-based plugin.
Okay. Is that because you wanted to... Yeah, why is that?
So truth be told, I have most of my front-end experience is using React. Yeah. So it was kind of to bridge the gap for me. And instead of relearning some things, I went with something I already knew. I would not use React for this again.
Yeah.
I think it's a low overkill for something like this, but
I'm just very, very quickly looking around here. So this is running the binary. This is very similar to what we do in VS Code. It's identical. I wouldn't blame you if that's where you got it from.
I don't think so. I think I wasn't aware of the Veil plugin for VS Code, to be honest.
Okay.
I'm to be honest, I'm mostly using it in the terminal. So
it's very,
very inefficient right now.
TypeScript, it's not going to be that different. So I suppose the Veil server bit obviously needs to be pulled out. So is this the side panel?
Yes, correct. So something that I wanted to do was, update this so that it's using the new editor, the live preview one. I know that there is a plugin called Language Tool plugin that does something similar that has actually been updated to support the new editor API. So if you're looking for inspiration how to do that, you can look at them.
I was mostly interested in... so this starts to seem familiar. So basically, I'm making a lot of guesses here, and I seem to have hit upon some beta feature in GitHub that I haven't seen before. So basically, when you run Veil in the CLI or that JSON output, you get item by item issues with a bunch of metadata, like the level, the rule, the text, the span, etc., etc. And this is sort of going through them basically. Yeah.
Yes. Yep. And here we need to all everything you see that has like markers in there, that's using the old editor API. So you need to maintain this index of a marker in the editor and the actual Veil alert.
It's the whole thing is not too dissimilar from the VS Code one, which makes sense because they're both text editors written with plugins written in TypeScript. They're not going to be massively different from each other.
Man, I should have looked at your plugin when I was writing this, to be honest.
In some respects, because we're leveraging the problem view in VS Code, because an IDE is more familiar with something like a problem view, whereas in Obsidian, you don't by default have something like that. So in some respects, yours is kind of nicer because you're creating an output that is friendlier than just leveraging something that's already there.
Right.
So it's kind of better in some respects. But I think the main thing I wanted to get at is we see aspects of, you talked about the markers, which relate to the old editor, but whatever.
Yeah.
You have adding commands, you have add settings, which we saw, which we didn't really look at when we looked at the tutorial, but that makes sense.
No, correct.
Callbacks.
And I think a lot of the complexity in this plugin actually lies in the settings.
Yeah.
Because it's doing all the downloading the binary and making sure that it parses the .ini file and all of that.
Yep. We actually do it a slightly different way. You can also run unless that is what you did, instead of doing that, you can also run an equivalent command to like running the actual checks on CLI and get a JSON listing of all the settings instead. And you could parse that, at least in a more JavaScript-esque way.
Yeah.
I think that's it is what we're doing mostly for things like the location of the binary and things like that. So that's actually one way to potentially get rid of some of the settings as well. Although some people actually do want to set the path manually, but then it's an option instead of a default. But
another thing here is that anything that is referencing like code mirror here, like the iterate code mirror, this is also deprecated. So I think a lot of when it comes to like the views, the settings management, all of that should still be working. So the main thing that needs to be updated is the editor and how you display those squiggly lines in the editor.
It's pretty good. I mean, you haven't touched it in 2 years. There's been we'll ignore the thing we had to do, but it worked.
Yeah. I'm surprised, honestly. You got me sweating there for a minute.
It's something you haven't touched in 2 years. I wouldn't worry about it. But let's just wrap up We kind of went down a little bit of a specific rabbit hole there, but that's often what you're doing with these sorts of plugins. The ones I was looking at today I was looking at how to integrate Obsidian with Pocket, for example. I was actually looking at how to integrate it with Books, which is this weird Android e-ink tablet that I use as an e-reader, and obviously all of these sorts of plugins are generally to be helpful. You're interacting with some other thing. So it's not an uncommon task to want to do in development. But yeah, what would be your, if someone wants to go ahead and create their own plugin for something beyond that getting started guide, which was pretty quick and straightforward, what do you think people should do? What's your main piece of advice?
So first off, I would say that, build an idea of how would you like the user experience to be like? And this kind of assumes that you have some basic understanding of Obsidian itself.
Yep.
There is no, when you're building a plugin for Obsidian, there's no, like, you build this kind of plugin or this type of plugin. You have access to all of these capabilities. So you kind of pick and choose the capabilities that you want to add to your plugin, and you choose how they interact. So I would say that take a moment to think about how you want everything to, what the flow through the UI is.
Yeah.
And then you kind of detect and discover what capabilities you need to enable.
Yep.
And then finally, how to connect those.
Yep. No.
Like I mentioned, that, like, how do you share data between all of these, for example?
That's definitely...
I would say that, that's...
I'm trying to think of some others now. I also maintain a pandoc extension, but you don't really need that in Obsidian because you have that format converter already, don't you? Which is a default part of Obsidian.
So speaking about Veil, something I will just put out there. I hope that someone builds it, but I think honestly it needs to be built by the Obsidian team. To be honest, I think what I would love is to have some API for hooking into like syntax highlight or syntax checkers in general.
Yeah.
Like if you could get a squiggly line, you maybe right click it, and then you get errors or alerts from a wider range, like Language Tool, Grammarly, Veil. There's a lot of these tools that provide this kind of functionality, and having a central way of doing it, I would love that.
I guess the one thing the Veil binary itself is moving towards is providing a language server, which I haven't really looked into in any great detail yet because it's a new feature. I guess, but a lot of those tools don't really go down that path because they're meant for different audiences. But I suppose the problem is you start to then get to the point of like, what is Obsidian? It starts to become more like Visual Studio Code at that point. So I can see the holdback on it because, again, a lot of people who use Obsidian are not programmers, or they're not sort of fully programmers, if that makes sense. And once you start to make it too much like an IDE, maybe it will put off that audience. I don't know. It's hard to say.
Yeah.
I suppose I think people are used to seeing in, well, then I suppose you are in things like Word and Google Docs. You get, maybe. Yeah.
I like the idea of progressive disclosure and in the UX world, where you have a very simple view where you can start. You can get to know it, and then once you feel like, oh, actually, I want to do things differently, then you can kind of dive in, and eventually you might end up in an editor, like in a very code specific view, for example. But most users, they will end up only looking at the very simplified view.
I won't show you on the video because we're running out of time, but I will show you in a moment. But one thing I would say is look at something like Ulysses, which is a macOS, iOS only tool, but it has integration with Language Tool, one of the other options we mentioned. But it's not there by default. You have to go into like a review mode to see it, and then it's there. So that's, I guess, they're focusing on the prime thing people want to do is write, and then you can do the other stuff when you're ready, sort of thing.
Right, right.
Which is what you did with the extension as well, which I quite like, actually. In something like VS Code, I'd probably put the checks on by default. In something like Obsidian, when sometimes you just want to, get on with what you're getting on with,
yeah,
toggling it sort of makes more sense, or at least a setting to enable or disable, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it could probably be configurable for people
This
who
really feeds into what you're talking about. Like, think about what you want your flow to be and who are your users, because Obsidian is a very general purpose tool.
It is.
So you've got to think about who is it that's going to be using it.
Yeah, it applies to pretty much all product development, but like especially if you're building a plugin, if you build a plugin that has become very successful. I built plugins for different platforms before Obsidian, and some of them actually became pretty popular. And what you're gonna see is that people will ask you for things like, I really want this thing, and you might agree with them that it's a perfectly valid feature and it's great, but it would impact the usability of the plugin in a negative way.
Yeah.
And so you are forced to say no, even though you agree it's great. And the response is that, well, make it configurable. And anything that you make configurable will add to the complexity of the plugin itself. So you kind of need to do the trade-off of how simple do you want it to be versus how powerful do you want it to be. And then obviously the next step is how can you combine these two things?
The open source world is littered with these discussions, isn't it?
Right. It's to me, it's one of the most difficult things as an open source maintainer. Just like, what do you actually accept into the project?
I think what a wonderful place maybe to end. Marcus, if anyone wants to get in touch with you in particular, how can they find you?
I'm sure that you will put the link to my website. My consultancy is meduet.dev. You also have my personal website where you can see some of the stuff I've done before Obsidian. Some of the articles I published, which is available at marcus.se.net. I think those are the best places to get in touch with me. On both of those websites, you will find links to where I'm at on social media. I just left Twitter in case you see some broken links that don't work.
I'm trying everything still. And Obsidian is at obsidian.md, which is a nice indicator of the formats it uses, which I kind of like. It's not medical doctor, it's Markdown, I guess. But cool. Thank you so much for your time. That was a great insight.
Thank you so much for having me.